And Ayn Rand, more than anyone else, did a fantastic job of explaining the morality of capitalism, the morality of individualism.
But the Paul Ryans, the Rand Pauls, the Jim Jordans, these are the faces of the new ideas.
Rand celebrates capitalism and the individual.
The inspiration for a lot of these young guns comes from icons of the past. Ronald Reagan, Milton Friedman, Ayn Rand.
Ayn Rand, author of the novels The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged.
Atlas Shrugged might be the second most read book in history.
There were certain writers that just had this vision of the future.
Over the past year, The Economist and others have reported sharply rising sales of Rand's books.
Atlas Shrugged is out, so you got to get a scene from that new movie.
Okay, let me go.
And she still sold it. It's a comics because it was telling the truth.
I am a big fan of Ayn Rand. I've read all of her novels.
And so if Ayn Rand were here today, I think she would do a great job in showing us just how wrong what government is doing is.
This is Mike Wallace with another television portrait from our gallery of colorful people. Throughout the United States, small pockets of intellectuals have become involved in a new and unusual philosophy which would seem to strike at the very roots of our society. The fountainhead of this philosophy is a novelist, Ayn Rand, whose two major works, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, have been bestsellers. You say that you do not like the altruism by which we live. You like a certain kind of Ayn Randist selfishness.
I would say that I don't like is too weak a word. I consider it evil. Because we are now moving towards complete collectivism or socialism. And we are moving that way only because of our altruist morality.
Yes. Now, one of the principal achievements of this country in the past 20 years particularly, I think most people agree, is the gradual growth of social protective legislation based on the principle that we are our brother's keepers.
I feel that it is terrible, that you see destruction all around you, and that you are moving toward disaster until and unless all those welfare state conceptions have been reversed and rejected.
You are out to destroy almost every edifice in the contemporary American way of life, our Judeo-Christian religion, our modified government-regulated capitalism, our rule by the majority will. Other reviews have said that you scorn churches and the concept of God. Are these accurate criticisms?
Yes.
Christ, every important moral leader in man's history, has taught us that we should love one another. Why, then, is this kind of love, in your mind, immoral?
It is immoral if it is a love placed above oneself.
And then if a man is weak or a woman is weak, then he is beyond love?
He certainly does not deserve it. He certainly is beyond.
There are very few of us, then, in this world, by your standards, who are worthy of love.
Unfortunately, yes, very few.
Because it's that kind of thinking, that kind of writing that is sorely needed right now.
We would not give the government or the majority or any minority the right to take the life or the property of others. That was the original American system.
When you say take the property of others, I imagine that you're talking now about taxes.
Yes, I am.
And you believe that there should be no right by the government to tax. You believe that there should be no such thing as welfare legislation, unemployment compensation, regulation during times of stress, certain kinds of rent controls and things like that.
That's right. I'm opposed to all forms of control. I am for an absolute, laissez-faire, free, unregulated economy. Let me put it briefly. I'm for the separation of state and economics.
How do we build roads, sanitation facilities, hospitals, schools? If the government is not permitted to force, if you will, by vote, taxation, use your word, we have to depend upon the trickle-down theory, upon the noblesse oblige, the largesse?
I will answer you by asking you a question. Who pays for all those things?
All of us pay for these things.
When you admit that you want to take money by force from someone and ask me how are we going to build hospitals or roads, you admit that someone is producing the money, the wealth, that will make those roads possible. Now you have no right to tell the man who produced the wealth in what way you want him to spend it. If you need his money, you can obtain it only by his voluntary consent.
And you believe in the eventual goodwill of all human beings, or at least that top echelon of human beings, whom you believe will give willingly?
No goodwill is necessary, only self-interest.
Only
I believe in private roads, private post offices, private schools.
When industry breaks down momentarily, and there is unemployment, mass unemployment, we should not be permitted to get unemployment insurance. Social Security we do not need. Will depend upon the self-interest of these enlightened industrialists whom you so admire to take care of things when the economy needs a little lubrication and there are millions of people out of work.
Study economics. A free economy will not break down.
But when you advocate completely unregulated economic life in which every man works for his own profit, you are asking, in a sense, for a devil-take-the-hindmost, dog-eat-dog society, and one of the main reasons for the growth of government controls was to fight the robber barons, to fight laissez-faire, in which the very people whom you admire the most, Ayn, the hard-headed industrialists, the successful men, perverted the use of their power. Is that not true?
No, it isn't.
Because it's that kind of thinking, that kind of writing that is sorely needed right now.
In Ayn Rand novels, she leads her readers to see the very wealthiest people in society as heroes. Heroes who must be protected from taxes, from the government, from regulation, from bureaucracy, from anything that rich people might find restrictive in any way toward them becoming more rich. The rich are heroes and everybody else is a taker. And the more the rich have, the better for everyone.
Paul Ryan is on the forefront of efforts to dismantle the program by putting senior savings into risky Wall Street investments. Over the years, Ryan has not only pushed for privatizing Social Security, but also dismantling Medicare and slashing funding for Medicaid.
Paul Ryan has become a Tea Party favorite for pushing a controversial budget and economic vision marked by deep cutbacks to the social safety net, coupled with lower tax rates. Ryan's also proposed cutting food stamps for as many as 10 million Americans, cutting funds for programs like Meals on Wheels, eliminating Pell Grants for more than 1 million students. On the tax front, Ryan has proposed a plan to slash taxes for the wealthiest Americans while raising taxes on some of the poor.
But to Democrats, Ryan is a villain who would balance the budget on the backs of seniors and the poor.
There's no hiding what his plan would do. It would slash $5 trillion over 10 years. 62% of the cuts would come from programs that help the poor, putting a gigantic hole in the social safety net. That would lead to 8 to 10 million people losing their food stamps, at least 14 million people getting kicked off the Medicaid rolls. And since it would repeal the Affordable Care Act, another 30 million people would become uninsured. Republicans say they want to curb out-of-control borrowing and spending, but these deep cuts would not balance the budget. Repeat, they would not balance the budget. Instead, government would see deficits until the year 2040. So really, what is the point? Ryan's plan is coupled with big tax cuts that would mostly benefit the wealthy. This chart from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities says it all. Those blue lines show that lower-income Americans would actually see their after-tax income decline, while those making more than $1 million would end up with more money in their pockets. Or, as liberal budget analyst Robert Greenstein tells New York Magazine, quote, it would likely produce the largest redistribution of income from the bottom to the top in modern U.S. history.
What has been true throughout Ryan's entire history in Congress, though, is that he likes to release really big, ambitious plans to reconstruct social services. So he was the key House architect of Social Security privatization in 2005. Excuse me. That plan would have cost more than $2 trillion. The Bush administration dismissed it as irresponsible, as John Chait can tell you more about. He wants to restructure Medicare. His original budget, as you mentioned, was incredibly radical on Medicare, completely taking the public current Medicare option out of the game entirely. Later on, he moderated that a little bit. He wants to turn Medicaid over to the states. There would be no federal role at all, and the federal funding would only grow with inflation, meaning that about 16 million people would end up being thrown off of Medicaid due to the size of that cut. By the way, it's a larger cut than his cut to Medicare. He's not about reducing deficit, and he's not about reducing spending, by the way. He wants to increase defense spending in his budget. He's about essentially taking the federal role in these programs and shrinking it, turning them over either to the private market or over to the states, and then capping the amount that they can actually grow.
I just want to speak to you a little bit about Ayn Rand and what she meant to me in my life and the fight we're engaged here in Congress. I grew up on Ayn Rand. That's what I tell people. Everybody does their soul searching and trying to find out who they are and what they believe, and you learn about yourself. I grew up reading Ayn Rand, and it taught me quite a bit about who I am and what my value systems are and what my beliefs are. It inspired me so much that it's required reading in my office for all my interns and my staff. We start with Atlas Shrugged. People tell me I need to start with Fountainhead, then go to Atlas Shrugged. There's a big debate about that. We go to Fountainhead, but then we move on, and we require Mises and Hayek as well. But the reason I got involved in public service, by and large, if I had to credit one thinker, one person, it would be Ayn Rand. And the fight we are in here, make no mistake about it, is a fight of individualism versus collectivism. And when you look at the 20th century experiment with collectivism, that Ayn Rand, more than anybody else, did such a good job of articulating the pitfalls of statism and collectivism. You can't find another thinker or writer who did a better job of describing and laying out the moral case for capitalism than Ayn Rand.